Guys, welcome back. We are back with Uriah and McKinley this week again.
Hello.
And we are going to continue our series on the armor of God. Do you guys remember last week what we talked about? Uriah?
Truth.
The belt of truth. And McKinley, can you tell us about that?
So the belt of truth is basically
Speak up, please.
it's when you tell the truth, you face the truth, and you don't listen. Sort of like you don't listen to lies. You know the truth.
We fight evil with truth, and we can find the truth where?
The Bible.
In our Bibles. Yeah. So this week we are going to continue that. If you guys got your night printed off last week, you guys were supposed to color in the belt of truth. And this week we're going to continue on learning about parts of the armor of God. So let's see. Today's Bible story, we're going to find out about people who looked really good on the outside, but on the inside, it turned out that their hearts were more focused on themselves, and they were focused on themselves rather than focusing on God. We're going to see what happened in the Bible. Remember, the Bible is one way that we can find that truth, and it's one way that God shows us his righteousness. And that's kind of part of our Bible point this week. So our Bible point for this week is we fight evil with righteousness. And that's going to go into our next part of our armor we're learning about.
I know what it is.
Yes?
The breastplate of righteousness.
The breastplate of righteousness. That's correct. So if you look at Ephesians 6, hold on here, verse 14, stand your ground, putting on the belt of truth and the body armor of God's righteousness. So we're going to put on our knight over here.
The chest plate.
Oh, the chest plate or the breastplate. This is a breastplate. It's the same thing, okay? So if you want to go ahead and color in the breastplate or the chest plate of righteousness on your knight, yeah, it's across the front of your knight. You can do that as I continue.
On his shoulders?
Yeah, it's just like the body armor in the front, okay? So we're going to see what the Bible says about fighting evil with righteousness. All right, so we're going to dive into our Bible discovery part of our lesson as everyone's coloring in their breastplate of righteousness. So last week we said we're in a battle against what? We're in a battle against evil. We're in a battle against Satan all the time. He's always going to be trying to cause us problems, cause us to do bad things. We're always in a battle against evil. So listen to this again. Actually, not again. I didn't read this yet. This is a different verse. In Ephesians 6:10-12, a final word: be strong in the Lord and his mighty power. Put on all of God's armor so that you will be able to stand firm against all strategies of the devil. For we are not in a fight against flesh and blood enemies, but against evil rulers and authorities of the unseen world, against mighty powers in this dark world, and against evil spirits in the heavenly places. So we read that last week again too. So we know that we are not battling people. It's not like a typical war battle that you would think of. We're in a battle against unseen evil forces. And so we're learning that we fight evil with not truth this week. We fight evil with righteousness. That's our Bible point. So some people think of righteousness as doing the right thing. But we're going to explore how it goes a little bit beyond that, all right? So I have a sentence, and I want you guys to fill in the blank, okay?
Okay.
So here's the sentence. You should never blank at church. What would you fill in that blank with?
You should never blink instead of blank at church.
No, I can't see you, McKinley. What should you never do at church?
Disobey God.
Disobey God. Maybe you could say, you should never say bad words at church. You should never fight at church.
You should never
goof off at church. There's all kinds of things we can fill in that blank, right? So I want you to think about this. Do you ever do those things that you filled in the blank with? Do you ever do those outside of church? Maybe. Maybe some people do. Uriah does not. That's good. Well, if someone doesn't do the bad thing at church, but does it outside of church, does that mean that the person is righteous when they're at church?
No, not really.
McKinley says no. Why?
Because just because you're in one place, doesn't mean you can't do it at another. You learn these things at church so you can do them in other places, not just there.
Okay. A lot of people might behave one way at church, but they might act differently outside of church. And looking at the way they behave at church, you might consider them righteous. But let's get to the heart of righteousness, okay? So to explore righteousness, we're going to look at some guys in the Bible who acted really, really righteous or acted really perfect on the outside. You look at them and you're like, wow, they're really good people. They were the religious leaders, and everyone looked at them as examples of how to live the right way. We're going to see what they did to be righteous. All right? So these are some of the things they did. They wore Bible verses in boxes on their arms, kind of like a bracelet. That seems pretty good, right? Wearing, Bible verses everywhere. You would think that maybe they follow those verses, right? They went to other countries to tell people about God. Is that good?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that seems pretty good. They made promises to people, and the people could count on them to keep those promises. That's good, right? If someone promises you something, you want them to keep the promise. Yeah. They also gave people money. And overall, they looked pretty clean and pure. They weren't filthy, dirty. They took care of themselves. They looked like you could trust them. So all those things that I talked about, they seemed like good things, right? We're going to see what Jesus thought about those wonderful things that they did and whether they were the most righteous guys around. All right? So I'm going to read you some verses. I want you to listen and think about how Jesus is responding to them, okay? So we're going to go to Matthew 23, and the first one is verse 5. This is Jesus' response to these religious leaders. Everything they do is for show. On their arms, they wear extra wide prayer boxes with scripture verses inside, and they wear robes with extra long tassels. So what's Jesus saying there? What did he say? The first sentence he said. They do it for show. Are they doing it for the right reasons? Doesn't seem so, right? Verse 15. What sorrow awaits you, teacher of religious law, and you Pharisees, hypocrites! For you cross land and sea to make one convert, and then you turn that person into twice the child of hell you yourselves are. So they would go and they would convert people, but those people were attracted to the way the Pharisees lived and how they did things, but they weren't necessarily converted because they wanted to follow God and they truly believed in God. So verse 23. What sorrow awaits you, teachers of religious law, and you Pharisees, hypocrites! For you are careful to tithe even the tiniest income from your herb gardens. Hold on, I'll answer that in just a second. But you ignore the more important aspects of the law: justice, mercy, and faith. You should tithe, yes, but do not neglect the more important things. So they would only maybe do the things that they thought were important. They weren't doing everything that God told them to. They were just doing the parts that they thought were what they should be doing. Verse 25 to 31. What sorrow awaits you, teachers of religious law, and you Pharisees, hypocrites! For you are so careful to clean the outside of the cup and the dish, but inside you are filthy, full of greed and self-indulgence. You blind Pharisee, first wash the inside of the cup and the dish, and then the outside will become clean too. What sorrow awaits you, teachers of religious law, and you Pharisees, hypocrites! For you are like whitewashed tombs, beautiful on the outside, but filled on the inside with dead people's bones and all sorts of impurities. Outwardly, you look like righteous people, but inwardly your hearts are filled with hypocrisy and lawlessness. What sorrow awaits you, teachers of religious law, and you Pharisees, hypocrites! I'm going to answer that question in just a second. For you would build tombs for the prophets your ancestors killed, and you decorate the monuments of the godly people your ancestors destroyed. Then you say, if we lived in the days of our ancestors, we would never have joined them in killing the prophets. But in saying that, you testify against yourselves that you are indeed the descendants of those who murdered the prophets. And in verse 33, he says, snakes, son of vipers, how will you escape the judgment of hell? Whew. So Jesus, he didn't sound too impressed with the Pharisees' righteousness, did he?
I have a question.
Okay, hold on. I'm going to answer a couple questions because Uriah had a question. But did it sound like Jesus was impressed with how they were acting?
No.
No. What was his tone in that? How would you describe Jesus' words to the religious leaders?
He was mad at them, like he said that they weren't doing what was right, and that they should be punished.
Okay. Did he say they should be punished?
Well,
Did they?
no.
Not completely, maybe. All right. So Uriah had a question as I was reading. He asked, there was a word that we kept saying over and over again in these verses, and it was the word hypocrite. He asked what a hypocrite was. That's why he kept bugging me. So a hypocrite is someone who pretends. It's someone who says one thing and does something else.
So like opposite?
Kinda. So these Pharisees were doing all these things that seemed good, but on the other side, they weren't really doing exactly what was right. Okay? Does that make sense? Yeah. McKinley, what was your question?
It's sort of the same thing. He kept repeating the same sentence.
Yeah, he kept saying that. What sorrow awaits you, teachers of religious law and Pharisees, hypocrites. He was saying what sorrow, what, like something sad was going to happen, right? Sorrow is like sadness.
That's what I mean by punishment. Like he kept saying like that they should.
Something's awaiting them, right? Yeah.
Something bad.
Jesus knew their hearts and knew that everything they did was all for show. They were trying to be righteous on their own just to impress other people. But we can't be righteous without Jesus. When we fight evil with righteousness, it's about our hearts turning into God's righteousness. It's not about doing things that impress other people. When we go about our day, we should not be helping others, serving others, because we think that's going to make other people feel good or impress them or it's going to make me look good. We should be doing those things for God. Okay? And that's how you can have righteousness in your heart. With the Pharisees in mind, think back to the original question I asked you to fill in the blank. If you do the right thing only when you're at church, are you a righteous person?
Nope.
Or are you righteous at church? I mean,
Sometimes.
Not necessarily. And we all falter. We're not always going to be perfect, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we want to try our best to whatever we say and act like in one situation, we want to say and act that way in all situations, right?
Like I said, you can't be, they teach us at church to do it at other places, not just there.
Yeah.
Maybe.
And I mean, we're all guilty of this. I know I'm guilty of this. Sometimes I have to remind myself, I'm like, am I acting the way at home, the way that I would want other people to see me? Sometimes the answer is no. And so those are things we need to work on. Sometimes that can be something about you guys too, right? Is the way you're acting now, I say that sometimes too, right? Do I say that? I say that to my kids. Would you like other people to see how you're acting right now? The answer is no. Then those are things we need to work on to become more righteous like God, right? So Jesus called the Pharisees hypocrites and whitewashed tombs. A hypocrite, like I said, Uriah, was a pretender. The Pharisees looked nice and perfect on the outside, but they were dead and rotten on the inside. If your actions look nice, but your heart isn't turning to Jesus for righteousness, you can't fight evil with your righteousness. It would be like going to a battle and you had aluminum foil all over you to protect you. Would that protect you?
No.
No. So we would need metal and a body of armor, right? So that's what it would be like. And that, the tinfoil would be easily defeated. But if we have God's thick armor on, we can go into that battle and fight the evil with righteousness. So when we fight evil with righteousness, we wear God's body armor. And here's what that looks like. We're going to stay in Matthew 23, but we're going to jump back to verse 3. 23, 3 and 4. So practice and obey whatever they tell you. You don't follow their example, for they don't practice what they teach. They crush people with unbearable religious demands and never lift a finger to ease the burden. Jesus said not to crush people with religious demands. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
What are some rules that you feel like they crush you? Is there some rules that you're like, oh my goodness?
Wearing a mask.
In the past.
Hardly breathe.
Yeah, okay.
Maybe like what speed you're supposed to drive, because you're like, oh, I need to get here on time, but I'm only allowed to go this fast. In a game.
In a game, sometimes Uriah says, sometimes those rules feel like they're crushing you because they're not letting you win because you have to follow those rules, right? Yeah. So we fight evil with God's righteousness. So we don't demand that people should be perfect on their own, right? Verse 11 to 12 says, the greatest among you must be a servant, but those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. Jesus said to be kind to others and do things for other people, right? Can you tell me a person that you know like that? Is there someone you know that is a servant to others, is kind, and does other stuff for other people?
You.
Thank you.
Nanny.
Your nanny. That's their grandma. I think we know lots of people in
Our
the
parents.
church. that do this? Parents, family members, our pastors,
him,
Uriah, yeah.
her.
We all should be doing those things, right? In Matthew 23:23, it says, "What sorrow awaits you, teachers of religious law, and you Pharisees, hypocrites, for you are careful to tithe even the tiniest income from your herb gardens, but you ignore the more important aspects of the law. Justice, mercy, and faith. You should tithe, yes, but do not neglect the more important things." The Pharisees ignored justice, mercy, and faith. Why do you think those things are important?
That's like how you should act. Like, makes you like
Why is faith important?
Like, cause
start with that one. That one's easier.
Cause like it's how you should believe in people and how you should believe in God. Like you have faith in something.
Yeah. Mercy is like having compassion for someone or forgiving someone. Why is it important to do that?
If you don't forgive someone, then they may think that you're still mad at them, even if it wasn't something that you really should be mad about. Like you have to forgive them, even though you know they did something bad, but you should forgive them because sometimes they don't even mean to. Okay. Sometimes it was an accident and people can get carried away really easily.
Okay. So the Pharisees kind of kept score of the right things they did. They liked things you could measure, and they liked how many Bible verses you could wear or how much money you gave. Then they could show off how great they were. They were like, "Oh, I gave $100 and you gave 10. Look how good I am." Right? That's how they would do things. But they missed out on the more important but less showy things. We fight evil with righteousness when we show justice, mercy, and faith in Jesus. What would you say if I wanted you to take a drink out of a dirty cup? Ew. We'd be grossed out by a cup that's dirty on the inside. It doesn't matter how the outside looks, right? The outside could be like diamonds or something. In the same way, our hearts are far more important to God than what our actions make us look like on the outside. That's what Jesus had to say. So God cares more about what is on our hearts than the things that we are physically doing in this world. Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right, I'm going to read Matthew 26-28. "You blind Pharisee, first wash the inside of the cup and the dish, and then the outside will become clean too. What sorrow awaits you, teachers of religious law, and you Pharisees, hypocrites, for you are like whitewashed tombs, beautiful on the outside but filled on the inside with dead people's bones and all sorts of impurity. Outwardly you look like righteous people, but inwardly your hearts are filled with hypocrisy and lawlessness." Jesus said that on the outside, the Pharisees looked righteous, but on the inside, their hearts were filled with hypocrisy and lawlessness. They were like a clean cup on the outside with dirt and mold on the inside.
Ew, I don't want to be filled with mold.
We fight evil with righteousness by having hearts that are turned to God. Most importantly, we need to remember that our righteousness doesn't come from our own strength. That's where the Pharisees got it all wrong. We fight evil with righteousness when we rely on Jesus for our righteousness. So now we have Jesus's powered body armor on the inside. Now we can stand up in battles.
Yes.
Yeah. We looked at some tough stuff that Jesus said to the Pharisees. Maybe you didn't think Jesus would say something like that, so harsh, right? He was pretty harsh with them. But he knew that the Pharisees' hearts were all about themselves and not about God. That not only made him mad, but it also broke his heart. Listen to what he said after he put them in their place in verse 37 and 38. O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones God's messengers. How often I have wanted to gather your children together as a hen protects her chicks beneath her wings, but you wouldn't let me. And now look, your house is abandoned and desolate. Jesus was sad because he wanted to gather and protect his people, but they wouldn't let him. They wanted to do things their way, not his, and it cost them everything. So consider this. One last question to think about. Will you let Jesus gather you and give you his righteousness? Yeah, I think the answer should be yes. We will let Jesus give us his righteousness, and we will do our best to outwardly show that righteousness, right? Yes? All right. So there's a lot of verses in today's lesson.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff to think about. So if you guys have any, a lot of stuff to remember. If you guys have any questions, you can always email me, email the pastors, talk to your parents, whatever it is. If you need help on clarifying some things that we discussed. So that is all we have for you today. I hope you guys got your knights colored in, your breastplate of righteousness. And don't forget that we fight evil with truth and we fight evil with righteousness. And next week we'll continue to see how else we fight evil. All right? So I hope you guys have a good week. We'll see you guys next time.